McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop, Season 3, Episode 11, Haunted House. October 17th, 1921. Continued. Well, diary, just like that, I paid Mr. Threed 10% of the first month's rent, which I still had from pawning the goods, and the house was mine, for 3 days. It was twilight as I returned. A terrible time to approach a potentially haunted house. The sky was dark and glowering, and the house seemed darker than it had been. Then again, I suppose a lit window would have been worse. I hadn't turned on the lights. Mr. Threed had given me a key, and so I unlocked the front door. The door creaked on its hinges and wailed as I entered. I shut it and locked it behind me. I knew Mr. Threed thought I was going to return to a comfortable apartment and investigate this house in my spare time. But not at all. I was going to sleep here. I think the dust made a hushing sound as it moved across the floor. I glanced up into the darkness of the stairway, and I felt like something was watching me. I held my breath. Then I told myself to stop being silly. If something was watching me, then it was probably a night enthusiast or a robber, and I should be dealing with them head-on, instead of cowering at the foot of the stairs. The house seemed suddenly so huge, however. Who knew what was happening all the way up on the 3rd floor? I decided to light a few lamps to make the place seem cheerier, but then I realized they would all be gas and I didn't have a match. So I teleported back into the dining room, the room with the coat closet, where I'd entered. I arrived and nearly died. Something huge and dark was in the closet staring at me, and then I realized it was just the coat. I wished I had a light, but the pale glow coming in through the windows would have to do. I settled myself opposite the wall and took out Mara's jelly. I had used this stuff before to perform small miracles, and I hoped it would work again. As far as Mara knew, it simply allowed you to teleport, but I'd discovered that I could teleport into the future by concentrating on 1921 as I drew the symbol. My hope was that Mara's jelly came with a few more options as well. I tried this, I tried that. To my joy, my plan worked. Then I took a deep breath, stepped into the closet, and then used the coat to teleport. I entered the closet of McGillicuddy and Murder's pawn shop, and to my relief, the door was shut again. The coat had been left in the closet. If the night enthusiasts intended to round up murder objects, they hadn't done it yet. I paused and listened. It was several hours later now. I'd spent a lot of time pawning stolen goods and renting houses. From the sound of things, the night enthusiasts had finished tying up my friends and leaving them in the living room. It sounded quiet out there. I bit my lip. I hoped that the secret basement hadn't been deserted already. What if everyone had already been dragged off somewhere? For my plan to work, I needed everyone to still be here. I turned the doorknob slowly. Oh, so slowly. And then I opened the door a faint crack. The living room was dark, but there were bodies huddled on the floor. It was my fellow pawn shop enthusiasts, still tied up, but asleep. In the corner, I saw the dark, pacing form of a night enthusiast. I took a deep breath. Not quite the scenario I was hoping for. They were being guarded. But if I could only get my plot set up. The first question was, how to avoid the night enthusiast who was guarding my living room. I stood in the closet for several minutes, feeling like my breathing was loud as an ox, while I thought, what to do. Ugh, if only I could teleport away from him. This was too frustrating for words. Then suddenly, I realized I'd only tried to teleport out of the secret basement, not across it. In my mind, I pictured the teleportation barrier as, well, a barrier, like a giant bowl that had been set down on top of us. But what if we could teleport around inside the bowl? I tried it. And it worked. I was so startled I nearly yelped. I found myself back in my old room, and then I let out a fussy moan because I missed this room already and I was going to miss it more. Then I sat down on the bed and breathed deeply. I could teleport across the pawn shop. This was excellent news. I hadn't known that I could, but my guess was that the other pawn shop magic unusuals did know that they could. Perhaps, as they lay huddled together in the living room floor, they were concocting plans. In theory, of course, they could teleport back and forth until the night enthusiasts got so annoyed with chasing them that they devised a spell to prevent teleporting across the secret basement. My friends were wise, however, and they'd probably chosen to keep the teleportation a secret from the night enthusiasts. I mean, maybe the night enthusiasts knew. Maybe they were watching we who belonged to the pawn shop to make sure no one was missing. But if I was a night enthusiast, I don't think I'd expect my prisoner, who had been bound and gagged for hours, to suddenly vanish. I would have assumed, at this point, that it wasn't possible for them to teleport. I would expect them to act like scared sheep and bolt, if bolting had been an option in the first place. But it was possible, and they could get out of the living room. Only to another area of the secret basement, but that was all I needed. With Mara's magic jelly in my pocket, I took a deep breath and began the plan. I slipped out into the hallway and began to draw eyes. I drew eyes and drew eyes and drew eyes, carefully designing each one to work the way I needed it to. The closer I got to the main area of the secret basement, the more I began to hear footsteps, muffled conversations. The night enthusiasts were still very much here. Just to be safe, I teleported to a different hallway and drew symbols there as well. Then, teleporting near the living room, I let out a God-forsaken howl. It worked. The night enthusiasts guarding the prisoners came running. I found it funny that they didn't teleport, but then again, they didn't know their way around down here, so teleporting to the exact right place to catch me would have been difficult. He had to choose between 6 or 7 hallways that the noise might have come from. Sometimes, even we magic unusuals have to rely on our ears and internal sense of direction. With a crack, I teleported as soon as I heard them start to run. I teleported into the living room, and to my relief, no night enthusiasts were in sight. For a few seconds, I had the magic unusuals all to myself. Thankfully, the howl had woken most of them. They blinked and looked around, a bit scared. "Hello," I whispered quickly. "It's Maud. You can teleport across the basement, but I assume you knew that already? Teleport to the east hallway. There are eye symbols on the walls, and they glow. Touch one. You'll get out. The night enthusiasts can't use the symbols, so as soon as you do it, you'll be safe." This was what I'd learned about the eye symbols I could draw by practicing in my haunted house. It was possible to prevent certain people from using the symbols. I'd drawn one that only a night enthusiast could use, and surprise, I couldn't use it. So, I had to infer that I could create a portal only accessible by members of the pawn shop. We could keep the night enthusiasts out. I finished my speech. I rather expected the pawn shoppers to stare, or to wait for an opportune time, but they began to disappear like popcorn kernels. "Oh," I said, "well, that works." I was about to teleport too, when I remembered one loose end I'd left hanging. Literally. I opened the closet door, put on the coat, and teleported that way instead. I am still unsure, diary, about taking murder objects with you. Typically, we touch murder objects and leave them where they are. When I teleported into the Whisklet cave, however, I took the china eye with me because I had brought it into their world on my person, so it had left on my person. Does your head hurt? Mine hurts. All this to say, I wrapped that coat around me and teleported with it on, and the hope was that I would take the murder object with me, out of the pawn shop and into the haunted house, where the night enthusiasts wouldn't be able to touch it. When I teleported into the closet, I realized it had worked, because I was still wearing the coat. So, one could take murder objects with them. Then I realized why we never did, because by removing the murder object and taking it with you, you were erasing your chance of getting back. I wonder how many magic unusuals throughout history had used that method to escape, never to be seen in their own time again. Well, it was not something to take lightly, that was for sure, but it was the right move for us. I had taken the coat. That meant that the night enthusiasts couldn't follow us. We were hidden. And, for the most part, I'd gotten all the imprisoned magic unusuals who belonged to the pawn shop. All around me, I could hear magic unusuals popping into the haunted house. I was sure they'd be as scared as rabbits. And, come to think of it, they'd be hopping like rabbits too. They were still tied up. And gagged. I had a group of hopping, gagged magic unusuals on my hands. I burst out of the closet and began to untie people. They all calmed down at the sight of me. "Maud!" Scotland exclaimed. "What is this place?" As soon as one magic unusual was untied, they began to untie everyone else. Within a few minutes, we were all standing free. my haunted house seemed less threatening when filled with people. Especially loud ones who were all shouting at me at once. As soon as I could, I calmed everyone down and explained what was going on. How the night enthusiasts couldn't follow us, and how, once we were ready, we could return to 1921 to get back to the pawn shop. "So we're safe," Rupert said. "Safe as houses," I said. I decided now was not the time to mention that this house might be haunted. After all, what was the point in scaring everyone? All the rumors about this house being haunted were almost certainly not true. "Maud, you're a marvel," Scotland said. She sat down and huffed out a breath. I looked around the group. Octavia wasn't here, nor was Wrath, or Mr. McGillicuddy. "Do you know who got away?" I said to Scotland. She sighed. "Mr. McGillicuddy and Wrath are in custody. I think they took them to the Night Enthusiast prison. I have no idea how to get there." "Oh, jolly day," I said. "It so happens that I do. We can get them out in a few hours, if we're lucky." "Were they the only two who were taken prisoner?" "As far as I know," Scotland said, "it was only those two." "No Octavia," I said. Scotland shook her head. "As far as I know, she got away with the others. About half of us escaped." "How can we get them back?" I said. "Get them here." "Do we need to?" Rupert said. "They're on the run. They're probably all right." Rupert had a point. Those of us who'd escaped weren't in any immediate danger. "Still," Scotland said, "they have powers we don't have, information we don't have. We're all pieces of a puzzle. If we could reunite the group, we'd understand who's missing. What if someone else was taken prisoner, and we don't get them out on time, because we don't know that the Night Enthusiasts have them?" I suddenly realized that everyone was staring at me, expecting me to make a decision. Was this because I'd rented a house? "Yes," I said. "I think we should get them here. Who has any ideas?" People began to squabble. They were hungry and tired, stressed, and probably had sore wrists from being tied up. No one was in a wonderful mood. Ideas were floated back and forth, but based on what we knew, and the resources at hand, we decided to have a girl named Ira write a large message on the floor of the pawn shop, right by the entrance to the secret basement. Ira's unique magic unusual power was to write a message that not everyone could see. She could leave details, as well as a glowing eye symbol that led straight here. "What if none of them go back to the pawn shop?" Rupert said. "Well, a lot of them were gone on missions," Scotland said. "Very few managed to get up the stairs and out when the Night Enthusiasts attacked. They'll return home expecting everything to be normal." "And then come here." "And then come here," Ira said cheerfully. Ira was about 18 and extremely pleased with herself. "Yes," I said. While the others began to explore the house, looking for bedding and beds and couches to nap on, I showed Ira how to craft a portal. She disappeared back into the pawn shop, and a burly fellow named Hubert went with her as a bodyguard. If all went well, they'd be back in about 5 minutes. "Ah, the pawn shop," Rupert said. He and Scotland and Matthew John were still hanging around. He looked wistfully at the portal. "I wish you could bring back the banana cream pie I left in the icebox." I laughed. Then I said, a bit daringly, "I could go get it." Rupert squinted at me. "You're serious?" "Well, no," I said. "Well, maybe. But don't you see? We can go back. We can go back any time. We can teleport into the secret basement and snatch anything we've forgotten, then use a portal to come here. They won't be able to follow." "They'll prevent it eventually," Scotland said. "They'll stop our ability to teleport across the secret basement, and they'll hack the eyes out of the woodwork, so we have no way to get back." "They'll stand there with loaded guns," Rupert said, "if they have any sense. If we're spotted, we're dead." "Maud has something, though," Matthew John said. "It's risky, but it's there. We haven't lost our home. We just have to be extremely careful if we return to it. But it's in our back pocket. It's an option." That makes me feel incredibly relieved, to know that it's not completely closed off. After that, we lapsed into silence. We were all thinking about our home, snatched from us by our enemies. They'd found our secret. They had Mr. McGillicuddy and Wrath in custody. I felt like something worse was coming, like this was only the beginning. All this time, I'd taken it for granted that we would someday defeat the Night Enthusiasts. Now I suddenly felt like we were on a slope, slipping rapidly towards destruction. Perhaps we would be a blip in magic unusual history, the sad little attempt to stop the Night Enthusiasts that never went anywhere at all. "How do you think it happened?" Rupert whispered. My stomach turned. I felt guilty about this. I was worried that I'd caused it. Hadn't I been the one breaking quarantine over and over? Had one of the night enthusiasts followed me in? It seemed strange to think that we'd keep them out for years, and now suddenly they managed to spy on us and follow us in. To be honest, I was worried that it was something else. Something we'd overlooked. That the night enthusiasts had a secret weapon we didn't know about. October 18th, 1921. Diary. It's been a day. A lot has changed here since then. Let me get started with the basics. To start, we've added another 10 magic unusuals to our number. Most of them are pawn shoppers who were simply returning home and saw the message. But one was one of the magic unusuals who escaped the night enthusiasts by bursting up the stairs and out of the secret basement. His name is Corinth, and he remembers every single person who escaped with him. Everyone who got up the stairs. Octavia wasn't one of them. So Octavia is a prisoner too, I said. The night enthusiasts have Mr. McGillicuddy and Wrath and Octavia. Scotland bit her lip. Maud, I don't think they do. Well, where else would she be? We were interrupted by the bleat of a goat. I flew towards the sound. Did the goat get out of the bathtub again? I said. If we ruin this house with goat urine, you know we're going to have to pay more money on it. My fellow magic unusuals, after a good nap, had taken it upon themselves to get us food and money. Someone was milking a goat in the bathtub, having teleported to the goat, nabbed the goat, and teleported back with the goat. Before they'd started milking the goat, however, the goat had galloped free and left us a present in the front parlour. Thankfully, the marble floor mopped up cleanly, but I was in terror of what would happen if the goat left another gift on the wooden floors. I dashed up the stairs. No more goats, for heaven's sake! Just milk the goat where you found it! I burst into the bathroom and found a fellow milking the goat inside the bathtub. I huffed out of breath. I can't milk it where I found it, the fellow said. The farmer would have seen me. Oh gosh, I said. Well, then teleport into an abandoned field to milk it, not here. That's a good idea, the fellow said cheerfully. I'll do that next time. Gah! I left the bathroom in a tizzy. Despite our goat problem, the house was starting to smell lovely. It wasn't home, but it was a good temporary base. At this point, everyone had been assigned a corner and some bedding, and the house was filled with tiny dormitories. The smell of beef and onions wafted up from the kitchen, as 6 or 7 of us had volunteered to prepare meals. All in all, things were going well. We have most of our number here, except Mr. McGillicuddy and Wrath and Octavia. That's the other thing that's gone horribly wrong. They moved the prison. The night enthusiasts. When I went to the crypt with some of the others, the crypt had been destroyed. And after an hour of searching, we knew that the murder object that led down into their prison was gone. So, for now, they are in danger, and we don't know how to get them back. I made my way back to Scotland to finish our conversation when I smelled something funny in the air. Seaweed. It was a clammy, damp smell. I looked around to see where it was coming from, and that's when I noticed fog, low and lethargic, pooling out from underneath the door. I opened the door, but the fog vanished. I raced back to Scotland. About 10 of us had gathered in the main hall at the foot of the stairs. I reached Scotland out of breath. At that moment, the lights went out. I felt a chill. Damn! Someone cried. Did they forget to pay the gas company? Nope, wasn't the gas company. Something smelled like blood. I turned to Scotland and whispered, Scotland, ghosts are just a myth, right? Ghosts don't exist? Maud, Scotland said, don't be ridiculous. Of course ghosts don't exist. They're At that moment, a ghost appeared. It rose out of the floor, slowly, at the top of the staircase. It writhed slowly out of the ground, glowing pale turquoise and clawing at its arms with its hands. It had eyes that bled and a face melting like candle wax. It looked at me with dark, savage eyes and screamed. On top of everything, we had ghosts. We hope you've enjoyed Season 3, Episode 11, Haunted House, of McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop is written and performed by Minerva Sweeney Wren. All rights reserved. Are you plagued by jabberwocks with eyes of flame? Do they come whiffling through your Toldy wood? What you need is a weapon that will snicker-snack and... Hang on. Are you hearing an advertisement for Vorpal swords right now? You are not. Do you know why? Because this podcast is free and always will be. This podcast is advertisement-free and always will be. However, there is a unique opportunity awaiting you if you wish to support this podcast and become a $1 patron. Minerva Sweeney Wren hopes to start a second podcast called The Dark and Decrepit Planet of Spin, where instead of merely listening each week, you will solve real puzzles and make real choices that determine the outcome of the tale. Think of it as an enormous collaborative storytelling adventure. For more information, please go to patreon.com/SweeneyWren. Please consider sharing this podcast with your friends. A post on the audio drama subreddit, a social media share, or an in-person recommendation do more to market this audio drama than anything Minerva Sweeney Wren can do on her own. She relies on you. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop will continue with Season 3, Episode 12. Your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins.